Hi, in this tutorial, we're going to go over the multiplication and division of real numbers. So today you'll learn how to multiply real numbers, Hi, and in this tutorial, you'll learn how to multiply and divide real numbers. Hi, and in this tutorial, we're going to go over the multiplication and division of real numbers. So today, you'll learn how to multiply real numbers, how to multiply more than two real numbers, how to find the multiplicative inverses, how to use the definition of division, how to divide real numbers. You'll learn how to simplify algebraic expressions involving multiplication, how to determine whether a number is a solution of equation, and how to use mathematical models involving multiplication and division. So, multiplying real numbers is the multiplication is repeated addition. So, for example, 5 times 3 is the addition of 5 3 times. 5 plus 5 plus 5. Or you can also say that it's the addition of 3 5 times. And they all equal 15. So you can see that multiplication is just repeated addition. So the product is the result you get when you multiply. So for example, when we multiply 5 times 3, our product is 15. So here's how to find the product of two real numbers. So first, we're going to multiply their absolute values. Now, if the product of the two real numbers have the same sign, then that means that the product is positive. Now, if the product of the two real numbers have different signs, then that means that the product is negative. And if one of the numbers is 0, then the product is 0. So let's do an example. Let's multiply negative 5 times negative 10. So the first thing we're going to do is take their absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. And the absolute value of negative 10 is 10. Now we're going to multiply 5 times 10, which is 50. Now because the two numbers have the same sign, then that means that our product is going to be positive because if these numbers are even, have the same sign, then that means that our product is going to be positive. So when we multiply -5 times -10, our answer is positive 50. So now let's multiply 3/4 times -5/7. So again, we're going to take the absolute value of 3/4, which is 3/4. Take the absolute value of -5/7, which is 5/7. So now we're going to multiply these two. So 3/4 times 5/7. We multiply it across the top. So 3 times 5 is 15. And then we multiply across the bottom. 4 times 7 is 28. So now, because the signs are different, that means our product is going to be negative. They have different signs, so that means our product is going to be negative. So 3/4 times -5/7 gives us -15/28. Now here's how to multiply more than two numbers. So the first thing you're going to do is take their absolute values. Now if the product of the negative numbers are even, then that means that the product is positive. If the product of the negative numbers are odd, then that means that the product is negative. If one of the numbers is 0, then the product is 0. So let's do an example. Here, let's multiply -3 times -2 times -1 times -4. So we're going to take their absolute values. Absolute value of -3 is 3. Absolute value of -2 is 2. The absolute value of -1 is 1. And the absolute value of -4 is 4. So now we're going to multiply them. So 3 times 2 gives us 6. Now 6 times 1 is 6. And then 6 times 4 is 24. Now to find out the sign we use, we look at the negative numbers. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Now because our negative numbers are an even number, then that means our product is going to be positive. So we're going to have a positive 24. So now let's multiply -3 times 2 times -1 times -4. So we're going to take their absolute value. -3 is 3. Absolute value of 2 is 2. The absolute value of -1 is a 1. And the absolute value of -4 is 4. So now, again, 3 times 2 is 6. 6 times 1 is 6. And then 4 times 6 is 24. Now to find out their sign, we look at the negative numbers. So we have 1, 2, 3. So because the number of negative numbers are odd, that means that our product is going to be negative. So the multiplicative inverses or reciprocals is two numbers whose product is 1. So here's an example of a multiplicative inverse or reciprocal. We see that 2 can be written as 1 over 2, and that their product, when multiplied, equals 1. So we have 2, or we can rewrite that as 2 over 1, as we can write that as 1 over 2 by flipping them. So that's our reciprocal. And then when we multiply 2 over 1 times 1 over 2, we get 2 over 2, or 1. So let's do an example. Let's find the multiplicative inverse of 5. So we have 5, and it's 5 over 1, and its multiplicative inverse is 1 over 5. We just flip them, we just write them upside down. So now when we multiply 5 times 1, we get 5. And then 5 times 1, we also get 5. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. Now let's find the multiplicative inverse of 1/3. So we have 1 over 3. So its a multiplicative inverse is the opposite. So we just flip it over. It's reciprocal. It's 3 over 1. So now 3 times 1 is 3. And then 3 times 1 is 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. Now a quotient is the result of dividing a real number by a non-zero real number. So for example, if we divide 8 divided by 2, well, our quotient is 4. Now the quotient of two numbers can be written as multiplication. So for example, we can rewrite 8 divided by 2 as 8 times 1/2, which is the reciprocal of 2. So here's how to divide two numbers. If two numbers have the same sign, then that means that their quotient is positive. If the two numbers have different signs, then that means their quotient is negative. Division by 0 is undefined, meaning you can't even do it. So let's do an example. So let's divide 21 divided by 3. So we know we have 21 divided by 3. So 21 divided by 3 gives us 7. So because the two terms have different signs, we have a positive 21 and a negative 3, then that means that our quotient is going to have a negative sign. So we have a negative 7. So dividing 21 divided by negative 3 gives us negative 7. Now let's divide negative 1/3 by negative 3. So we have negative 1/3 divided by 3. So we know we can rewrite this as multiplication. We can say that negative 1/3 times the inverse of 3, which is 1 over 3, clear that out really quick, which is 1 over 3. So now if we multiply that, forgot to add a negative sign here. So we have a negative sign here. So if we multiply that, we have 1 times 1, which is 1. And then we have 3 times 3, which is 9. So now because our the two numbers have the same sign, that means our quotient is going to be positive. So that means we're going to have a positive 1/9. So negative 1/3 divided by negative 3 equals 1/9. So simplifying an algebraic expression involving multiplication. Let's go over simplifying algebraic expressions involving multiplications. So the identity property of multiplication states that the product of a non-zero number and the 1 is that same number. So for example, we know that if we multiply the square root of 3 times 1, well, it's just that same number, the square root of 3. So multiplying any number times 1 is that same number. So here we're multiplying x by 1, which just equals x. So here again, we're multiplying 1 times 2x plus 3, which just equals the same number, 2x plus 3. So the inverse property of multiplication states that the product of a non-zero number and its multiplicative inverse is 1. So that means that if we take 6 times its inverse, multiplicative inverse, it equals 1. So 6 times 1 over 6 equals 1. Now, here we have 3x times its multiplicative inverse, 1 over 3x, which equals 1. Now here we have 1 over 2y times 1 over y minus 2 times y minus 2, which equals 1. So the multiplication property of negative 1 states that the product of negative 1 and any non-zero number is the additive inverse of that number. So here, if we have negative 1 times the square root of 3, well, that means that it's the inverse of the square root of 3, which is negative square root of 3. So if we take negative 1 times negative 3/4, well, all we do is take the inverse of negative 3/4, which is 3/4. So if we multiply negative 1 times x, well, the inverse of x is negative x. So here's another example. If we take negative x plus 4, well, that's the same thing as the inverse of x plus 4, which is negative x minus 4. Now, another way to think of this is that you could distribute this negative. So the double negative property states that the property of negative 1 and any negative non-zero number is the additive inverse of that number. So for example, if we take negative 1 times negative 4, well, it's just the additive inverse of negative 4, which is 4. That's the double negative. You have two negatives equals a positive. So here if we have negative of times negative 6y, well, we just take the inverse of negative 6y, which is positive 6y. Now, the negative signs and parentheses states that if a negative sign is in front of a parentheses, we remove the parentheses and change the sign of every term in the parentheses. So for example, if we have negative 11x plus 5, well, all we do is remove these parentheses and then change the sign. So if we have positive 11x, we're going to have negative 11x. And then if we have positive 5, we're going to have negative 5. So now here, we have negative times 11x minus 5. So all we're going to do is remove the parentheses, and then we have positive 11x. So that means we're going to have negative 11x. Well, here we have minus 5x. So here we're going to have plus 5x. So all we do is write the opposite. So let's do an example. Let's simplify y, 1 times x. So we know any number times 1 is that same number. So 1 times x is just x. So now let's simplify 7x times 1 over 7x. So we know that 7x, that any number times its multiplicative inverse is 1. So 7x times 1 over 7x is just 1. Now let's simplify 4x minus 5x. Well, we know that any number that's being subtracted is the negative inverse of that number. So here we have 4x minus 5x, so we can say that's like 4x plus a negative 5x. So we have 4x plus negative 5x, which gives us negative 1x. And we know that any number multiplied by negative 1 is the negative inverse of that number. So the negative inverse of x is negative x. So now let's simplify negative 7 times y. So this is the double negative. So any number that's being multiplied by a negative number, we have two negatives. When we just take the negative inverse of that number, the negative inverse of negative 7y is 7y. So two negatives make a positive. So now here, let's simplify negative 7x minus 3y plus 2. So all we're going to do is remove write this over. So all we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do is remove the parentheses. So we're just going to remove these parentheses, which gives us 7x minus 3y plus 2. So now all we're going to do is write the multiplicative inverse of the numbers. So if we have 7x, we're going to have negative 7x. And if we have negative 3y, we're going to have plus 3y. And if we have plus 2, that means we're going to have minus 2. So that's our answer. So in this tutorial, you learned how to multiply real numbers, how to multiply more than 2 real numbers, how to find the multiplicative inverses, how to use the definition of division, how to divide real numbers, simplify algebraic expressions involving multiplication, how to determine whether a number is a solution of an equation, and how to use mathematical models involving multiplication and division. So now try and solve the problems in our multiplication and division of real numbers workbook. For more help, sign up for online tutoring, and in the next video, we're going to go over the exponents and order of operations. Thank you.